Perfect. And we are live. We're good.
Oh, awesome.
I'm gonna go check it really fast. Yes, we're good.
Oh,
We're live.
awesome.
Great. All right, it's all yours, guys.
All right. Thanks again. Sorry, we're a couple minutes late. Let's get going here. Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Dwayne Rose. I'm a division chief in the H Directorate for Recruiting and Retention. You know, one of the ways we can help meet our objectives to get new and retain current members is to offer training that will support the knowledge that our HR team really needs. And that's why we're here. Today's training is on onboarding new members. This is actually the third of three planned topics for this year, 2025. And chances are good we'll probably have some new sessions for you next year, but we're working on that. For the purposes of delivery, we've grouped all of the auxiliary districts nationwide and beyond nationwide into what we call the Eastern, Central, and Pacific regions. And that's what we're doing tonight for Eastern, even though a few of our districts are not actually in Eastern because they changed the names since we started this. But the next will be Central, and after that will be Pacific, and that will conclude this topic. But let's get going. In a few minutes, you'll see what we mean by onboarding. We've really evolved to see needs beyond just recruiting, which is kind of, back when it was easy to get volunteers, that's kind of what we did. And a lot of the time it worked out and sometimes it didn't. But that's what this session is about. What can we do beyond recruiting that will help us get a good start for new members? Rio Annis is going to share for us. There's so much more that goes into making a prospect, taking a prospect and turning them into an engaged, successful, and satisfied member of our team, Coast Guard team. The reason we are using YouTube is that some of our sessions have too many participants for Zoom to support them. When we send the presentation to you on YouTube, we can train more people in less time. But we do regret we don't have the same interaction between presenter and participants. We would, however, welcome your questions, your suggestions, and critiques on how we did. And then I would also mention the link that you used tonight is being recorded. So you can use that same link to go back in at any time, and you can watch the whole presentation again. You can fast forward to a certain thing you wanted to check on, or you can rewind and get to a certain place. So it's pretty flexible. But let's get underway. Your presenter is Rio Annis. He is a branch chief in the H Directorate in my division. He's also a division commander. He's a district staff officer for HR, staff officer for HR, flotilla staff officer for HR, and he is also a flotilla staff officer for marine safety in case he gets bored. I share or have had all these same offices with Rio, except the last one. So, but anyway, let's get you underway so we can share the material and then get you out of here. Take it away, Rio. Thanks.
All right. There we go. Okay, good evening. And as Dwayne said, our topic 3 here tonight is new member onboarding and beyond, actually. So getting your new member through the onboarding process, does it matter? Well, yep, it actually does. By onboarding them, staying in touch with them, getting them through all the necessary things that have to be accomplished. If we really put our full effort into that, the rewards will really be great with this new member. And of course, we're about recruiting and retention. So retention is really big. If we do this, properly, we should have a member that will stick with us for quite a while. So it is a critical phase for the new member. We should not assume that a new member, would be that type of person that's a self-starter. We might find there are a few of them out there, that can completely, be able to navigate their way, through the process on their own. This process really requires full attention and guidance from leadership and the mentor or mentors. The new member and mentor, whoever that person may be, need to walk through this phase together. So even though you can give somebody instruction on how to do something, you need to work through that with them. Never leave them kind of hanging on their own. And some of you may be newer into leadership or in an HR position, and you might remember when you started, did you get full attention, somebody helping you through all the phases of getting into the auxiliary? We want to make sure that is something we do for everyone. So again, welcome. The HR position is one of the most valuable positions of all the other bridge staff, since we're the lifeblood of the auxiliary. Without HR, there are no members. If we don't really do our job, how are we going to retain members in the auxiliary? How do we get them to reach their goals? So you are mission critical. We're there for the members from the beginning, middle, and the end of their service. So much like the private sector HR, we assist our workers with almost every aspect of their employment needs. So, again, we're always going to be that go-to people. We worked with them through the application process, and now we've got them joining our flotilla, and we need to continue to be there for them. And even though they may be handled by somebody else as a mentor, that doesn't mean you may not be there as a person that they'll go to ask about how do they do something or where can they find information. So even if it's not particularly in our direct function, we should always, help them, direct them to where they can get assistance. Consider yourself an unofficial but vital mentor. So a presentation note on this. So this is a session that was built, at a national level, and is going to be standard practices throughout all the flotillas, so that we can, all kind of be guided by the same, information. Now, it's intended to offer district HR officers basic vetted training materials for their new officers and refresh current ones. And this is so they don't have to go and create a presentation on their own. We've got something already prepared here. We do recognize, however, that there are different practices between districts and DIROC. So in these instances where you see something, slightly different than what you operate by, just consult your chain of leadership for any direction or questions. So what's the next step? We got the prospect's application submitted, and as we now know that it takes some time for it to be processed, and that varies between districts. But what do you do? What do you do with the new member to keep them active until the enrollment notice is received? Keeping them active is really critical. So we want to invite them to events or missions. They don't have to be in uniform, but they can be there to see how do we do things, and ask questions and be involved and learn. We want to keep them involved in flotilla meetings, so that they can meet other members and get a feel for what the different, staff officer positions are and how things operate. Provide training related to their interests. So even though they can't get into some of our training online without an ID number, there is other training we can provide. It might be the FEMA training. It could be just hands-on training that your flotilla provides at a flotilla meeting. Anything that you can come up with to keep them active. You might have your own ideas, what else can you do? But once they get their employee ID number, there's so much more. And that's why onboarding is even more critical. So what we're going to cover is, the general orientation of a new member. So there's some new member essentials, accessing Aux Data 2 and the Aux Officer Directory, member profile changes, because they may need to make some changes to their profile, uniforms and their procurement, Coast Guard Exchange, Coast Guard Auxiliary Association, training. So there is that new member training, core, BQC2, and other training, mission qualifications and requirements, new member mentoring, and individual development plan. So that's really important, so we can kind of keep them on track to reach their goals. Other items we'll cover will be, changing their status from AP. That's what they come in at with their employee ID number. And now they've completed their training. How do we get them to that BQ status? And then once they're BQ, how do they get an ID card? And then new member reports. So we know that, reports can be difficult sometimes, but, we need to report our 7029 hours and then any missions that we, perform. So we want to make sure that the new member is comfortable with how to do that. So we'll look at this session, or this topic here, is kind of like a guide with a lot of reference material. Where do you find material and how do you do it? So in the introduction of this new member, you want to introduce them to a couple of really important FSOs. One will be the MT, the member trainer, and the other is the IS, information services, to assist new members through their first 9 months. Or you could assign a mentor that accomplishes all of those items. The new member certificate, the new member oath. They should get a new member certificate upon joining the auxiliary and getting their employee ID number. And then at a flotilla meeting, they should be doing the new member pledge or oath. Provide instruction to obtain a password through the member zone, Aux Data 2 and Aux Directory, and how to navigate the system. So somebody that's very good in that could be your IS person. Review opportunities and options, help them start planning and how to get there. What is their interest? What is their goal? What do they like to do? Assist a member with obtaining uniforms. That's also very important and can be a challenge for new members. So they will get a new member certificate, should come from DIROX. I know in 9th Central, there's an email sent out from DIROX welcoming the new member with a copy of the certificate attached to the email, but there is a hard copy that is mailed to that new member. When you know that a new member has joined your flotilla, please make sure that they have actually received that hard copy certificate. It might have been overlooked. It could have got lost in the mail. We want to make sure that that new member actually gets their certificate. And if they haven't received it in a reasonable amount of time, let's follow up on that to make sure that they do get it. So we have the pledge for new members, and this is what you would find in the auxiliary manual. So it's a general one that you probably read before yourself or have heard others do. But you can customize this. I actually took that verbiage from out of the Aux manual and put it onto a watermark paper and actually inserted their name and the information on there. And then after they read through their pledge, it was theirs to keep as a memento, basically. I think it was a kind of a good idea. They seem to appreciate the extra work on that. Kind of make them feel a little more welcome. So you have to access Aux Data 2 and Aux Directory. Here's the links to get to those areas. I know that the new member will, within a few days after getting their email welcoming them to the auxiliary, they should get an email with the their username for Aux Data 2. And you know, in Aux directory, their username is just their ID number. So they need to get help set up, you know, with their password for both of those systems. Just in case they need to make any changes on their profile, maybe a name wasn't spelled correctly or an address, you know, might not have been exactly right. You know, you can help them to get this information changed. You can use the 7028 form found in the forms warehouse, and then the IS can, you know, make sure this is entered in Aux Data 2. Because at this point, they've just joined the flotilla. They obviously won't have the ability to do Aux Data 2 on their own. Also, I've had a couple of instances, so please be aware of this, where the email address that the new member had on their application might have been input incorrectly by Dirox. So we'll need to communicate with Dirox to get that corrected so that they can actually access Aux Data 2. If their email address is incorrect, they'll never get that secondary passcode. New member uniforms. So new members need assistance with obtaining uniforms and deciding which one to start with. And this can be quite frustrating for a new member if they are not actually assisted in getting this done. A good guide is in the H Directorate. It's a new electronic uniform, and there's award ribbons tool coming soon. And this is the link for getting to the area for that. As a member of the auxiliary, we have the privilege of wearing Coast Guard uniforms with distinctive auxiliary insignia, as you're aware of. And when we're in public, those that we help do not necessarily distinguish between active duty, reserve, or volunteers. So, you know, it's our responsibility to understand all the components of the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary uniform. Your mentor, whoever that might be, and flotilla leaders, you know, will help ensure that this new member understands what uniforms, you know, you'll need and how to properly wear the uniform. In the H Directorate, they do have this blue button uniform guide. So if you click on that, it will take you right to the new electronic uniform guide, interactive guide. And remember, it is our responsibility to properly represent the U.S. Coast Guard, especially when we are in uniform. So this is what the interactive guide looks like. And there's also a link here. So if the blue button didn't take you there, this link will. And this is out of the H Directorate. And this is a really great guide. A lot of good information. So one of the tabs, once you get into this guide, will be for most utilized uniforms. And, you know, one of those is the tropical blue. And you can see this member here is all, you know, dressed up in the trops. He was wearing the combination cap, but obviously, you know, the garrison cap would be probably the first one to start with. It's a lot less expensive, and in most cases, it is appropriate for the short sleeve, you know, uniform appearance. The print on this is a little small, but this is just for, you know, so you can see what this looks like when you get on that page. You'll be able to read it properly once you're on that page, working with your new member. There also is, you know, on that same most utilized uniforms, it'll show you the ODU operational uniform and all the different components with the explanations on those. And it does the same for the alternative work uniform. So it's really that interactive uniform guide is really a good resource. There's also a drop down in there in the tabs for procurement in this interactive uniform guide. So it'll show you the Auxiliary Center, which is the first one here, and then the Coast Guard Exchange, flight suit items, shirt for AWU, and the shirt for, you know, the ACS polo. I'm going to just go through a little bit of the Coast Guard Exchange here. So when you click on that one link, it will take you to this page. And this is where your new member would then set up their login. Above here is also the link to the Coast Guard Exchange if you needed to go to it by another method. And remember, as the new member setting up their account in the Coast Guard Exchange, that they do need to remember to check that box for the auxiliary and add their employee ID number. One thing I did in my flotilla is when I have new people that, I'm getting them through the process, I've actually gone to the Coast Guard Exchange and did shopping already. And I've prepared a shopping cart and I save this as a PDF and I send it to a new member. So they've got something to visualize as they are then going through and getting their items of their uniform. And necessarily they may not get their shoes from here. They can get it from some other source, but it's still, a good reference guide for them to see what components they need to get. What do they actually look like here on the Coast Guard Exchange website? I did the same in a different fashion for the ODUs, explaining the different parts of the uniform and what they would need to look for as they're ordering their ODU uniform. Coast Guard Auxiliary Association is another source for getting some uniform items. The Auxiliary Association is the official authorized business arm of the Auxiliary, 501c3 charitable nonprofit. Manages the business and financial affairs of the Auxiliary, holds trademarks and licenses, receives and administers donations, grants, sponsorships that benefit the Auxiliary. And essentially, while the Auxiliary is a uniform volunteer organization that works alongside the Coast Guard, the association is our financial and business arm. Emergency assistance funds or partnerships in special cases for members facing hardship after disasters. So the AUX-A benefits now extend to members' immediate family. There are many benefits, so you should check those out. And it operates the Coast Guard Auxiliary Center, AUXN, for uniforms, insignia, and equipment, often at a discount. So that'd be another thing to check out. And the web link is at the bottom of this page, and a phone number. So new member training. Again, we can go back to the H Directorate website here off the Coast Guard Auxiliary website. This H Directorate, again, it contains a lot of good information. And I've got the link there for going to the new member info. So you can assist them in the completion of required training, which includes core, BQC2. And again, just like obtaining uniforms, this can really be frustrating for a new member. How do they get to that training that they're required to take? There are several steps to get there. So you need to help them get to those steps, work with them till they're comfortable being there and able to get that training accomplished. We do know that they need an approved safe boating course unless they already have one in possession at time of application. If working in operations, emergency management, and certain leadership roles, FEMA ICS 100 and 700 courses, and risk management is also required. We'd want to facilitate a mentor, someone with knowledge of the qualifications and or activities the new member desires. So while they are getting through some of this initial training, that they want to be boat crew, or they want to be a vessel examiner or an instructor. we want to line them up with a mentor that will help them get through that process as well. Setting up a flotilla spreadsheet to track each member's progress is also a good idea. So that you know what's been accomplished and what still needs to be accomplished. And then you want a guide to recruit on filling out their 7029s and mission reports. And going through all this training is something to be recorded on the 7029. Again, the H Directorate, we've got a couple links here. By just clicking on these booklets, these icons, it'll take you to auxiliary terms, and then a new member involvement plan. That is also a very good tool to use, which you can track the new member's progress. So in the core training, we know that they, just like the active duty reserve, we are all, as the auxiliary, need to complete this same core training. And it consists of 7 of these courses here. One is you take it one time and you're done. That's the ethics course. And the other are every 5 years. And you can find this training again on the H Directorate website. It's got a lot of these little icons, clipboards or books. You click on that and we'll take you right to how you can get at that training. The courses do require an enrollment key, but they are available right there on the Training Directorate website once you get there. BQC, similar situation here. Every new member is required to complete BQC 2 training, and this was for everybody who joined after 2018. And even if you were here prior to 2018, I do recommend going through this BQC 2 course. It really has a lot of good information. So it covers a lot of items that are useful to the new member. Almost everything they'd want to know about the auxiliary, missions, programs. It might prepare them for leadership positions of greater responsibility. And everybody needs to achieve BQ status. So this is great orientation and a key resource for the auxiliary manual as well. And again, if you don't get there by way of clicking on this little icon, this link here will take you to that. So once you get to new member training, the auxiliary classroom, this is what this will look like. Again, here's a link that'll take you there if you don't get to it by the other method. So there's more than one way to get there. But this generally is what the page looks like. And if the new member is already set up with Aux Directory, with their member number and their password, simply clicking on this blue button down here where it says click here to sign up or in with the Aux Directory, they're going to be using that same, should be using that same login information to get into the classroom. And just to make them aware that if the system times out, picture will be slightly different. Again, this wants a username and a password. That I would not use. That is trying to set you up with a different login and password. That's very confusing. All they need to do is come down here to the smaller icon where it says sign in with USCG Aux. That's their normal sign in, just the same as the previous login. Works really nice. Sometimes it'll save your password and you log in and take you right there. So required training is vital to the success of members. It's mandatory for a reason. And the sooner it's done and members possess knowledge they need, the quicker they can get on to, accomplishing, their desired goals. Members that are slow to obtain, this training tend to be less engaged, active, and less satisfied with the auxiliary. So we definitely want to do all that we can to get them through this training, give them whatever assistance we can so we keep them active and satisfied with the auxiliary. Most important attribute for a new member, can-do attitudes. We can teach needed skills, but of course they do need to bring a good attitude with it. But if we put in our effort to work with them, I think we'll be able to keep, they'll have that attitude to go along with it. Many districts reward members that achieve their required training in less than 30 days. And really, it's not that hard. I've had some people do it in, 2 days. And in my district, they do get a challenge point for that. Maybe your district does that as well, or it's something you can ask about. You might even make up your own certificate to, commend their attention to getting that training done in a short time frame. Any, certificate of appreciation would work. So they've gotten through their core training, and you want to get them onto, their mission qualification, whatever that might be. Again, each directorate has lots of these, icons here, and anyone you click on is going to give you the information of what's required for that qualification and a link of where to go to get more information on it. And for example, here, I clicked on the vessel examiner. So it'll show you even what the ribbon looks like, tells you about the goal, program prerequisites, and work requirements. So it'll take you down to the National Testing Center so they can take the exam. It'll tell you if they need to perform 5 vessel safety checks under supervision. So it's got, nice description on each one of those icons. There's even more here. And again, I've got the link in here to get to the H directorate. But you have lots of, icons here. So it might be chaplain or culinary services, health, U.S. Coast Guard recruiting, and so on. We also have academy partner, instructor, and public affairs. So one of the other courses that take up in the beginning, while they're probably doing their core training, would be a good idea to go ahead and get that risk management done too, because it is a requirement for other things down the line. And again, there's an icon on it, takes you right to that training, the classroom. And then the independent study courses through FEMA can be found on that training directorate. The most common requirements are the ICS 100 and 700. I've got a link how to get to that. And this, of course, is something that they can take prior to getting your employee ID number. So it goes back to one of those things, how do we keep them, active while they're waiting their ID number. New member mentoring and the IDP, the individual development plan. So I've got a link here for, good resources for mentoring a new member. Is this mentoring guide? I don't get into heavy in the mentoring here. This process, I'm just pretty much showing you where you can find information and, how you can use it. And of course, mentoring, it's a traditional method for orienting and training those new to the Coast Guard Auxiliary, which is what we're talking about here. And as well as a valuable means for supporting the development, even accelerating the professional growth of experienced employees, middle managers, and executives. The mentoring guide itself is a 20-page document, which includes an IDP, individual development plan. So these are good resources too. For tracking a new member and their training, I got this from District 13. I thought this was really a nice guide. So if you could develop something like this, you can check off all the training that they've gone through, core training, BQC2, intro to risk management. It'll take you right through everything. FEMA courses, so it's kind of a nice way to keep somebody on track and know what they've accomplished. And let's keep leadership in mind while we're working through this training here. We do want to get new members trained to take on potential leadership positions in the future. And start maybe as a flotilla staff officer after they've gotten comfortable with the auxiliary and the flotilla, you know, and all the things that go on. They might be able to help you out. Of course, we do need to keep, you know, gaining new leaders. We can't rely on, you know, our existing leaders to keep, you know, taking on flotilla commander every other 2 years. That does not work well at all. We need to breathe, you know, new life into our flotillas. So this leadership training, the H directorate here, you can click on that icon there and it'll take you to leadership training level 1. And then at the link at the bottom, well, I'm sorry, it'll give you, you know, work requirements to accomplish that. So it's really kind of laid out, shows you what you need to do in order to achieve that. And then at the bottom, there's a link that will take you to that leadership training and even the additional levels, 2, 3, and 4 and such. Members new and existing, you know, need to complete their core training, as we've already covered, initially and then every 5 years. And that's except for that ethics course that is only once. And they need to complete the BQC2 required for new members. And of course, that's required for anybody after January 2018. And they need to complete the approved U.S. Coast Guard boating safety course. So verify with your chain of leadership for the correct method of getting somebody from AP, which is what they come in at when they get their employee ID number, to the BQ qualification. You know, it might be a paper form. It could be an online form with submission to IS. You know, so just find out how that's to be done. It does not happen automatically. You may need to submit proof of core or BQC requirements, but in most cases, IS can verify that because it does load in the system. So the difference between IQ and BQ, IQ is somebody who does not have their boating safety certificate yet. So if somebody does attain IQ from AP, they can get an ID card, but then also somebody has boating safety certificate would then go from AP to BQ. And then for those people who continue more training would also be an AX. But again, verify, you know, with your chain of leadership, if you need to submit a copy of a boating safety certificate to upgrade somebody to BQ, find out what that process is. ID cards, so members new and existing. There's no specific form, you know, be it a national. Districts handle this in their own fashions. My district has an easy online submission that the new member fills out, hits submit. It goes to the ADSO HR who handles ID cards. And usually within a couple of weeks, the new member or the member has their ID card. So it's a pretty easy way of doing that. But again, you check with your district for the best way to do that. And make sure that all of your members, new and existing, know what that process is. I have had people who Google ID cards for the auxiliary and they get led down a very bad path and wonder why they never got an ID card. And that's because it went somewhere else other than through our auxiliary chain. Standard for a picture is a red background. Drop shirt for all members, no insignia required. And they must be current with core training. You know, we've covered that, and be in good standing with their dues paid, etc. And be BQ or IQ status at least. And do not send personally identifiable information via email. New member reports. So I mentioned, you know, earlier on that we want to assist them with getting reports done, especially when they're in a training phase. You know, we're keeping track of them accomplishing training, we want to make sure that it goes in the system. How much time did they spend on training, or how much time did they spend, ordering their uniforms, or anything else they might have done, attending meetings or whatever. So we need to assist them with getting their time into the system. The new member may not be capable of doing aux data 2 yet, but there could be somebody who's extremely good with computers who might achieve that very fast. But for those who are not, the 7029 form is still a way to go. Fill that out, submit it to the FSOIS so their time can be entered. And the 7029 form is, you obtain that through the forms warehouse, which is where you should get any form that you're working with. It always contains the most updated versions of forms. New member would just log in here. For the 7029, it would be the web form, and then it'll be the form version 1.1 will take him to that form. Again, Forms Warehouse is where they get any form, so it would be for the mission activity report. The 7030 is kind of a general for public affair events, as you're aware of, and 7038, 7046, most of us are used to those, but this is where you kind of show the new member, where they go to get these forms and how to fill those out. And certainly, you want to continue to assist them until they are, really familiar with it and comfortable with doing reporting. They may need continued assistance on this. So what we covered was like the new member essentials. As soon as they get in the door with their ID number, things we want to take care of right away. Accessing aux data 2 and the aux officer directory. Member profile changes. Getting their uniforms, and where do you get those from? The Coast Guard Exchange and Coast Guard Auxiliary Association are two of those sources. Training, which is the critical part for a new member. Getting them through the core and BQC2 and other kind of training. You want to make sure that's a smooth process for them. Mission qualifications. So whatever it is they want to do, we want to make sure we get them, headed the right direction and take care of all the requirements that need to be done. New member mentoring and individual development plans. So whoever is assigned to handle that new member and getting them through that whole process, use resources that are out there so we can kind of keep the new member on track and give them all the assistance that they need. And other items, we want to make sure we're updating the system for them. So once they've completed their training, we need to get them into that BQ status, and it's handled through the IS. ID cards, we want to make sure that we're able to get that to them. How is that process handled? And then, of course, we know for everyone, whatever you're doing for the auxiliary, we need to report our time. It helps the active duty. So we need to make sure we're getting our reports done. So we are at the end here. Wayne will kind of give you, last thoughts on this, and we do welcome your thoughts and ideas and suggestions. And just a reminder, as with new members, you are in a training class right now, so remember to credit your time on a 7029 or an aux data 2 using the 99G code. Wayne?
Great, thanks. I have just a few random thoughts I'd like to share with you. I think Rio did a great job, and I don't think he really missed anything. Some of what I want to share with you is rather quick, and maybe it's emphasis more than mention it or not. You'll find that we're doing a lot more emphasis on mentoring than we used to. Sometimes it would take place casually, sometimes it wouldn't at all. So the member had to kind of find their path, like Rio mentioned in the beginning, and sometimes they succeeded and sometimes they didn't. So we're finding that the more formal and planned mentoring is, the more effective it's going to be, because goals are set and benchmarks, and it's reported on how they're doing. It just makes it easier for the mentor and easier for the mentee to be successful. I would mention, that we have a guide on mentoring, uh, which is also getting a refresh right now. I'm on the team that's working on that, and that will be out in the not too distant future. It's a very excellent tool. I mean, the one that exists now is good. I think the new one will be even better. Um, just bear in mind with new people, navigating the auxiliary is not that easy. We're a quasi-military organization, and things are not developed uh, for user friendliness. We're trying to do better with that, but that's it's always been more important to get the information out than make it presented in an easy, understandable, efficient way. I would mention with uniforms, make sure you share that different districts usually have several sources for free uniforms. Uniforms, that are lightly used, and that can be, our uniforms are not real cheap, so that can help a new member get their uniforms more quickly. And also, it makes a difference. Like I don't live that far from the Coast Guard Academy most of the year, and they have cadets that wash out, and they turn their uniforms back in, and they become free uniforms. I guess the thing to bear in mind, though, is the people who go to the academy are maybe a little thinner than we are. So, but if you are thinner on the thin side, that's a good source. And sometimes Coast Guard stations have I forget what they call it, different things in different places, but they have a supply of things that auxiliary or Coast Guard have turned in. So it's worth checking out. Um, one thing I always want to mention, and I started early thinking about this myself, but when there are new members, like at meetings or at events like maybe a missile exam blitz, stuff like that, make them feel welcome and part of the team. You may think back to when you joined initially. Did people really go out of their way, to welcome you or to introduce themselves? Uh, I'm still a flotilla staff officer. And when I'm at a meeting and there's guests there or new members or prospects, I introduce them and I ask people to, introduce themselves after the meeting, because we usually have a little sort of a social time. And you'd be amazed what a difference that makes. It makes them feel like you care who they are and want to know more about them. So it's all these little things make a difference. Um, Rio showed links in the presentation, and we can also get you a copy of the presentation. They will be on the H directed in the not too distant future. But in the meantime, if you want a copy of the presentation, just email us and we can send those to you. Um, I found years ago, I was using bookmarks and I would end up with pages and pages of bookmarks. So it was hard to find the right bookmark within my list of bookmarks. But I found now that you can really do a pretty good job of finding whatever you want and just typing a few words on a Google search, like put, auxiliary or even just aux, directory. And chances are that will come up. Uh, and a lot of different things you can do the same thing. But I can't remember the last time I used a bookmark. I mean, a link, sorry, or a list from my bookmarks that I used to have. Also, remember the uniform inspections are required now, and make sure you get yours done, and make sure you have members get them done by the end of the year. Because if you don't do it, you can go under REAR, and that just a mess and something you can easily avoid. Rio talked a little bit about the Auxiliary Association, and we've gone to where people were members, and then we had them sign a form when they joined to be a member. We did away with that form. Well, it's back to being members again, and that's actually built into the application now. So everyone is we're a member of the Auxiliary. but we're also a member of the Auxiliary Association. Make sure you check it out and see what benefits are there. And there's also one, I'm not sure if it's part of the association or not, but there's the Coast Guard has a thing called MWR. I think it's um, Morale, Welfare, and Recreation. And you can get help if you're in like in a financial crisis or something. Sometimes you can get help, or you went through a disaster or something. There are some places around the United States where you can get housing, like if you're on a vacation. You could go stay at one of those places. I know I started out in the Florida Keys, and they had some cottages on the base in Marathon, Florida, and they have like a member of District 1 Northern right now, and they have some housing, that kind of cool places where you can stay. So it's worth checking out. Rio mentioned the value of taking even if you're not required to, or like I wasn't, I was grandfathered, but the basic, the course qualified, the number 2 version, the new one. It's really worthwhile to take that course. For one thing, you're working with people that have to take it, so you know more about it. But I found it also makes the AUX manual easier to use, because it's kind of the information that it provides sort of leads you through the manual in several places. And I don't know if you've experienced, but often when applications are processed now, BIROC skips right past AEP and goes to IQ, because the approval system is faster now than it used to be. Now that we're using Social Security, and everybody goes through the checkpoint, once a year. And real mission reporting hours is important. When I joined, doing your hours was not that big a deal, so we didn't make it part of our routine of when you're doing vessel inspections, or you're doing crew, which part of the crew stuff is usually done by the coxswain. But program business, whatever you're doing, if that's just part of your routine, then you'll get it into the system. And every hour that you have recorded in the system, I think the Coast Guard, I'm not sure if it's changed or not, but they used to get like $25. The Coast Guard would receive, for their efforts, which they always need. So it's kind of a cool thing. And it's nice to have your hours in, because then you get credit for them. For the total number of hours you served. When you get up to 750 awards, you get an award for that. I mean, 750 hours, get an award. And then each time you accomplish that again, you get an update to that award. Another pet peeve of mine, we used to say, when you joined and you had the training that you needed to do, and there's also more training now than there used to be. But we used to tell people, well, you've got a year to finish that first training, and don't do that, because it just does a disservice to new members. We want that new training to get done and out of the way just as soon as possible, because we found that when people do that, they're engaged earlier. They find there's more satisfied with what they're doing in the auxiliary, and they're more likely to stay with us as members. And at this point in time, it's difficult to get people to volunteer in the auxiliary or any other organization. So we want to help them become a productive, satisfied member with us, and not leave us. So that's all I could think of. I thought, as usual, Rio did a great job, but I always have a few random thoughts. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again at meetings. And again, if you have any questions, Rio is going to share the contact information, and maybe put up. I'm not sure, but it was also on the email, I think, that I sent to invite you to the session. So my contact information was there. Any questions, any suggestions, if you want to let us know what you thought of the session, we always appreciate hearing from you. So thanks for joining us tonight. And I don't know if you have anything else, but if not, we're
no, I'm all set. I think you covered it.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, and have a great evening. Take care.
Good night.